So welcome everyone. Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk. We are so fortunate today. We have a beautiful guest. We have Miss Juliette Van Schaardenburg. That is a mouthful. Juliette, how did I do on the pronunciation?
Amazing.
Thank you. We are thrilled to have you here, so welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're pleasure. It's our honor. So I'm just going to take a second and introduce you to our audience. We're going to have lots of people with their ears glued to this podcast to learn all about sensuality and all the wonderful things that you're going to share with us today. But I want to just take a moment and introduce you. Juliette is a coach. She's a teacher and a writer. And she writes on things like relationships, healing, intimacy, and sensuality. She is also the founder of a company called Feel Fully You, which helps empower women and couples reconnect with themselves. She's for over 5 years, she has trained and mentored hundreds of other coaches and leaders to be better equipped at handling trauma with their clients and their employees. Sorry, we just have somebody coming in. Where they can experience through deep knowledge and effective learning with their leadership and their connections as individuals. Juliette is a mother of 4 young independent adults who she loves fiercely. Joy, freedom, grief, and deep fulfillment, both for herself and others, are the key objectives that have shaped her as an individual and has shaped her business. So Juliette, we are actually just over the top that you've joined us today. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Excellent. So let's just jump in, because I know our audience is excited to just capture as much information as they can from you. And, our audience, we're Women in Leadership Talk. Our audience is predominantly women, but we do have men that join us as well. But, one of the things I'd like to just start out with the discussion today is, as women, we know how hard it is to be moms, wives, sisters, career women, super women, because that's most of the time that's where we are. And we a lot of times forget to make time for ourselves. And so, just to kick us off today, what do we need to do to reconnect to the essence of who we really are?
I love that question. And I was one of those. And at times I can still be one of those, right? We all have those moments where we're just on and on and on, and we're a mother, and we're a wife, and we're a partner, and we're a businesswoman. And all of a sudden you plop into bed and it's like, whoa, where did my day go? And I've really started, for me, how I deal with it and how I deal with my clients is we actually schedule in their time. So it might be just a few times a day to check in, put an alarm clock on, and just check in with your body, saying, hey, what's happening? What am I feeling in my body? Am I feeling like what kind of sensations are coming up in my body? Is it expansive? Is it contracted? Am I not even feeling my body? Is there sizzling going on? What thoughts are going on? Like, oh my God, I have no time. And really just take a breath. I mean, I call this like the sacred pause, just take 3 cleansing breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And that settles the nervous system, because we're just on the whole time. And then you start having the thoughts, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm emotional. And so often we then want to say, oh, it's because of a certain reason, and push it away or justify it. And actually the thing is like, oh, let's just be with who I am. Let's just give myself permission for 3-4 times a day for a minute. I'm going to check in with myself.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love what I heard you just say there about just be, right? Because we do so much, and we're so caught up on that hamster wheel of going, or even autopilot of just going and going, and just being can be even such a recharge for our total physical body, but our mental, emotional, spiritual bodies. So yeah, thank you. That's great.
I mean, and that's like the simplest thing, right? I mean, it's easy. It's simple, but it's maybe not easy, because even 4 minutes, 4 times a minute a day. I mean, I noticed myself, I put a timer on and like, oh yeah, I'm busy. I'm like, no, you can't teach this young woman and not do it.
Well, that's a good point, right? It's not do as I, what is that saying? Do as I say, not as I do.
And
Awesome.
from there on, you expand it, right? And you start like, what are the things that bring you joy? I mean, for me, I love flowers. I see you have gorgeous flowers as well. And it's just, I make my little bundles of joy. I go out into the garden, cut some stuff, or I get some things from the store, and just looking at it and being grateful, noticing the texture, noticing how it smells, and then noticing how my body and how my psyche responds to that.
Oh, I love that. So that's a really important tip, I would say, is surrounding yourself with those things that bring you joy. And it's not just about having it there, because there's one thing to have, let's say in our case, flowers. We both have flowers. But it's that, what does it do for you? What is that psyche? I love how that you're connecting those pieces. So, one thing you and I spoke about a couple of months ago, you had shared with me a little bit about your story, and, the fact that on the outside, everything looked perfect. You had everything just, going smoothly, and you had the travel and the gifts and the relationships, lots of friends. But on the inside, there was this feeling of emptiness or hollowness. And, a lot of women that I speak with, there's a lot of us that feel that way for different reasons. But, I just like to hear from you. What do you do? Like when that happens, what are some of the things that you would advise people on to really help them choose themselves instead of getting distracted by, let's say, all the gifts and the fun?
The gifts, the fun, the glass of wine, the Netflix, whatever it is to numb that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we as women, and especially as women and as mothers, are so ingrained. It's ingrained in us from childhood that we are the ones taking care of the children, being a perfect way, being a certain way, the perfect hostess, the perfect wife, perfect mother. Yeah, I mean, I have 4 kids, and I was like in PTAs, and then I was together with a partner with 3 kids. So we had 7 children between the two of us, 7 different schools, 7 different everything. So there's no time left to really start feeling into what you want. And that again is like, oh, start noticing your body, start noticing what's happening, become aware. The first step of what's actually happening to you is to start becoming aware, because that then is your first step towards self-love. Like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm quite tight with my partner. I'm a bit like, when he says something, I want to say something back, but I don't. So I build up all this resentment. And really to start noticing, it's like, oh my God, I have so many emotions that I've just pushed down because I should be bottled up and look amazing and have everything amazing. And instead, I'm really desperately lonely.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I hear most. It's like, I'm in this beautiful relationship. I have X amount of children, a good job, everything that I love. And I just feel desperately lonely. Like no one really knows me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
recognizing it is the first step, being aware of it.
Yeah.
Instead of hiding behind that shame.
Well, that's a really good point. And I was actually going to bring up, yeah, it's the guilt, it's the shame, because it's like, I'm not supposed to feel this way. Like I'm supposed to, have this persona that everything is perfect and, I can handle it all. But inside it's eating away at you. And that years of that can create a lot of destruction right? And, one of the other things you and I talked about is about the journey back to feeling, how do I want to word this? So it's like that journey when, you've gone through lots of things and there are traumas and that somatic release that needs to take place. Like, how would one know? Like, how would you even recognize that? Because I hear a lot of women, they'll say things like, oh, I'm just emotional right now, right? Or I'm menopausal right now. And so we disconnect or we disassociate with what's really happening within us. I know myself, I'm guilty of that with menopause. It was like, whoa, what the heck's going on with me?
Right.
Right?
That's an added little bonus that we get right around this time. Like, woo, hormones.
Yay, fun. So how does one know? How do you identify those differences?
So I would say that, first of all, we put a cap on our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And once you allow yourself to really go through an emotion and to feel what's happening into your body, to notice what kind of thoughts you have, and perhaps you even have an image and an intuition, it's very counterintuitive, but actually to allow yourself to feel that, to rant, to rave, it's never going to last longer than 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, trauma is a big word, right? And it's being used a lot. And the way that I like explaining it, it's anything that's happened too quickly for our mind or our psyche to really to handle.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that we go into that, that flight, fright, or freeze, right? We're like frozen. And often we don't even realize, like, think about when you're driving a car and you have an accident. Yeah, what an animal would do is run or freeze and fall and act like they're dead. But what we do is we get our insurance papers out. It's like, oh shoot, we're trying not to curse and not to get angry at the other person. But what happens in our body is that our nervous system's like, whoa, I'm really frightened here. And if we don't actually look at that, and if we don't release it at one point, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line, you're having a great time. You're on the beach somewhere, you're making love with someone, whatever it is, you're having a great time. And all of a sudden your body will start shaking and you're like, am I having a heart attack? What's happening? But that's actually how we complete the trauma cycle.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So your advice there is to just take a moment and be with whatever that feeling is so that you're not carrying it on with you later in life. Am I hearing that right?
Completely. And we all do carry, because trauma could be as much as someone looked at us in a certain way and it had us respond in a certain way. It had us make certain beliefs about ourselves, right?
Very true. Yes.
So, I mean, even if you think about sexual trauma, it might just be someone having looked at you a certain way, or you got catcalls from builders.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that actually just doesn't feel good. That's my body you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then you store that in that limbic brain. And so, okay, that makes sense. So then later in life, if something else can come up that triggers you, it brings back all of that memory from that particular moment.
And that's why often we react a certain way when our partner will have said something really innocent. But what happens in our mind, in our bodies, in our psyche is like, oh, we're being transported back to that moment that someone else did something like that to us. And we responded by tightening up and by like, oh yeah, feeling terrible about it. And
wow, yeah.
It's really interesting to start noticing what our triggers are, what sets us off, and really to start becoming responsible for what our behavior is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, and recognizing it too, that you're also not at fault. Like, right? Like that's a big one. I was just, as you were saying that, I was thinking of, like people who are maybe touched inappropriately as a child, right? That carries on with them because they feel shame, they feel guilt over that. And so then they struggle with other relationships throughout their life, because to your point, it could be just a certain touch or something that can trigger that thought, that emotion. So let's jump into, I'm going to switch our thinking, because one of the things that, where you caught my attention was the conference I saw you speak at when we were talking about touch.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe let's just go there. Let's explore a little bit about, how people view intimacy and pleasures, whether that's desires, pleasures, intimacy, touch, and spend a little time talking about sexuality and what some of your experiences are with clients.
Oh, it's funny because every time I try to get out of sexuality and intimacy, and it just,
comes back.
Yeah, like all the journalists call me about that. I'm like, okay, never mind. I do it all. But it's really, if you can't be truly honest with yourself about how you're feeling and how certain things, how you respond, how you get triggered by certain things, then it's really difficult for us to also ask for the kind of touch that we want. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of the main things that I hear from my woman. It's like, I don't really know what I like. And I have worked with a lot of women that never climaxed. They're always like, oh, I want an orgasm. I'm like, is it that moment of climax, that up, and then explode? He's like, yeah, but that's what it's like in the movies, right? Like, where did your education come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So let's go back to first, where did we get educated about sex? Is there some religious background there that told that sex or touching each other isn't correct? How did your parents talk about it? What did you get taught at school? I know here in England, it's pretty dire. Just a few weeks ago, there was a huge 3-page article in one of the biggest newspapers that I contributed to, that let's start actually talking about intimacy, talking about sexuality, talking about how it's okay to be touched, how it's not okay for certain people. I mean, I had to do this with my kids when they were young because I didn't want them to be touched the way that I had been by an uncle at age 5. So it's really starting to notice, it's like, oh, again, become really curious what's going on. And really build that vocabulary first of yourself. It's like, what do I like? Like, I'll teach people, it's like, hold out your wrist and hover your other hand over it and start seeing, is that the kind of touch that I like? Or do I want to have slightly more touch? Just grazing. And do I like it better when it's going up or down? Do I want slightly more pressure? Or do I want to be teased a little bit? Or do I like everything? And so often we don't know, and then we don't know how to express it. So then we get stuck in like, oh, I'm just doing what he wants. And he's like, I'm just doing what she wants. And it's like, and that's when you wind up with clients that haven't had sex for 25 years. And they're like, yeah, well, we love each other, but that's just not a part that we do anymore, which is sad.
It is, because it's
beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And both parties can gain so much pleasure from that if you can just have that open conversation. But I do think that, you hit on a couple of things there that are such key points of, just because of how we are raised. Like I can tell you in my household, my mother and I talked about sex when I was 40. And, it was like, and I've done the opposite with my kids. Like I've tried to have those conversations I have had with them at a younger age. Interestingly enough, more with my son. I think I shared that with you, that more with my son, he's more open to having that conversation than my daughter. My daughter's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. It makes me very uncomfortable. They've been raised in the same household. It's interesting, how we associate things, but pleasure is such an important aspect, and your sexuality and how you view intimacy is so important. And I know you do lots of great things. Maybe you can share a little bit about the Erotic Blueprint and what that is about, because I know you have a quiz that.
Yeah, I do. I know.
Yeah.
Later. So with the erotic blueprints, it's kind of like a love language, but then what is your way into pleasure? And for a lot of people, they're like, oh, pleasure first, but pleasure is very sensational once you start thawing your body, because what happens is once we've had an experience we don't like, we start armoring our body. We start like building up walls. It's like, oh, I
Mhm.
don't like that kind of touch. So you just, so then you need more and more and more stimulation. And once you start feeling and getting back to feeling everything, so that's emotions and body sensations, what people say is it's sensational and it's not always pleasurable, because at first it
Mhm.
feels like when you've had pins and needles in your legs or in your body. It's like, oh, that's not really comfortable. But then start having the language for it. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it velvety? Is it prickly? Really like start noticing that and not getting stuck on like, oh, I hate it. But it's like, oh, let's just be objective about it. What is actually happening in my body? So with the erotic blueprints, we say there's 5 different erotic blueprints, and there's also 5 stages. So you might be resting, you might be in menopause, so your hormones are a bit off. All these things are where you can start becoming a detective and looking what's happening. It's when I take my clients through the first assessment. I'm like, okay, so how old are you? Where do you live? Do you live near a mobile phone mast? What kind of medicine are you taking? Are there any toxic metals in your water? All these things can actually really influence how our bodies function, how our libido is, how our turn on is, and people don't really think about that. Like, oh yeah, I'm a bit dry, or I'm a bit this. So there are 5 different stages. So anything from resting to like heightened, super heightened, using sex and sensuality, eroticism as um, as a way of connecting to, almost like spiritual,
Mhm.
right? For manifesting things. I mean, you have like a whole range in between, right? And some people are a bit more adventurous. Some people are just curious. Okay, I might want to try some different touch. And then there are the 5 blueprints. So there's energetic. So someone that will just feel the energy, and you can eye gaze and people can have body orgasms. Now, all of these also have a shadow side. So for the energetic, they talk about yonis and universe, and are often quite ethereal, and you just see it. Um, but they will leave their body. There'll be like people that actually think, oh my God, the energy, I just left my body, and they need definite grounding. So big rooms might be too big for them. Big rooms full of people, they get overwhelmed. Uh, and it's just, once you start noticing this, you'll notice they're like, oh, I've got a lot of energetic people around me. I didn't realize that's what it is, and that they need a bit of time, and that our nervous systems obviously co-regulate, that it just needs a bit of time to get into that, to settle down. Then you have the sensuals that, love flowers. You can have an orgasm just by eating a fig. You use all your senses, full body orgasms again, loving like oils and bathing themselves. But they also have a shadow side, and it's like, oh, did I shave down there? Maybe I'm smelly. There are socks on the floor. Oh my God, the gas is on. What am I cooking tonight? So they're really in their head. I mean, anyone? Yeah, right. I mean, I've been there definitely. Right. I mean, right in the middle, it's like, oh my God, no, I got to pick up the kids. um, and then there is sexual, which is kind of like how we perceive sex from porn. We talk about genitals, and their aim is often to have sex, to have intercourse, to have, and they talk about cock, pussy, everything. And their shadow side is, I mean, they go from 0 to 60 really fast, so they can get off on anything, but they get bored really easy. And if they have to do too much foreplay in one of the different realms, they're like, yeah, it always has
Lose
to.
interest.
right? And if we look at that, that's actually what we see in porn, right? It always has to go like straight to, there's very little foreplay. Then there is kinky, and kinky is anything which is taboo. So for one person, that might be getting undressed with lights on. For another person, that might be BDSM, psychological, like look down. I didn't tell you to look up. Look down. Good girl. Or, flogging or anything. I mean, the realm of kink is humongous. I used to be a professional dom, so I know how big it is, and even then I've only seen a bit of it. But there's a lot of shame with that. Often partners will be together and the one partner won't know just how much the other partner actually craves either that kind of touch or being bound up or being talked to in a certain way. And then, of course, you have the dominant and then the submissive position. And, and some people switch between the two. So that's a huge realm. But what's sad about it is that there is so much shame. It's like, oh my God, my partner won't love me if they know that I'm a freak, I'm different. So those are all the shadow sides. And then the fifth blueprint is a shapeshifter. So a shapeshifter is someone who has all of these in them. And we think that we all were shapeshifters at birth. And then certain things happen to us that we don't, that we don't like everything anymore. But what happens with shapeshifters is like, I'm a shapeshifter, I'm a sensual shapeshifter. So is that we know how to please our lovers, we know what we want, but so often we'll play in someone else's arena that some of the other ones who say like, oh, I'll play in the sensuality arena because my partner's more like that. But then my energetic, where actually, I'm really energetic, and my kinky don't get, and my sexual don't get a lot of feeding. And that's when you get someone that you'll notice that has all the shadow aspects of all the other ones. It's like, oh my God, you never get that. It's like, oof, you have all the things about picking up socks, turning off the gas, etc. And it's funny because often you'll think that you are a certain blueprint, and you'll take the quiz and you'll be like, oh, I'm this. And then what we do is we actually do body mapping, because it's all well and good to say, oh, I'm this, and you can think your way into certain things, but it's when you start showing on the body how the body reacts and responds to certain things that you're like, whoa, I didn't realize that. Which is again where a lot of shame can come out, because partners don't actually want to show the other partners that for years they haven't been speaking each other's language.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. So there's lots of things went through my mind when you were.
I'm trying to just like give you a tiny taster of it.
No, that was beautiful. I mean, it really, it does help you understand also why you go through those periods. Like you just mentioned a minute ago, like, some couples go 25 years and they don't have sex, or how partners can be in a, relationship where things are good. And then all of a sudden things dry up, so to speak. But I would have never even thought of it that way. So that is huge, to understand what language the other person is, what their need is, what their intimate needs are.
And so often we've been taught that it's a certain way. So we're like, well, we only know that way. And then when all of a sudden our body starts responding in a certain way, we're like, whoa, this is amazing. I'm not broken. I don't need to be fixed. But so many people come to me saying, oh my God, I'm broken. I can't have sex anymore. I'm just turned off. What is wrong with me? And it's like, well, let's actually just see how perfect everything is.
Yeah.
And let's just start making sense of what's happening in your life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And oh, wow. We could spend the whole topic just on that in itself. But I want to make sure that we capture everything. And so one topic I know that comes up all the time, and I was talking to a colleague and friend the other day, and she said something about, how women never talk about orgasms. And orgasms come in lots of different ways, right? And I know you do a lot of work in the orgasmic meditation. And so maybe we can just take a minute and, just touch on it just to entice our audience.
Yeah. And yeah, more sexuality.
Yeah.
Right. I tried to run away with it, but it just keeps bringing me in. So yes, I used to lead orgasmic meditation in London. It's an American company, and it's actually a coaching company, but it started with a 15-minute practice where the person with the finger touches the clitoris. So one of them has to be, person has a clitoris. I'm trying to be all inclusive.
Yes.
And with as feather light a touch as if you're just stroking your eye and just trying to get like a tiny bit of mascara off. So first of all, people are like, what is that sex? It's like, no, we're not trying to get you to climax, because what I see as orgasm is that whole state, is like the whole chi that runs through your body. It's the up and the down. It's the journey to maybe climax and maybe not climax. But for someone to actually stroke the clitoris for 15 minutes with featherlight upstrokes or downstrokes to ground again, but there to be nothing else but connection, and to notice what's happening in our bodies. That's where I was talking about that the body starts to thaw, starts to defrost, where we often have something which is called glass shards. It feels like there are glass shards on our clit and off the clit, because sometimes people say you can't touch my clit because it's just too sensitive. Just stroke just on top. So it's about half a centimeter off. It's like almost stroking, but just above it, because people are energetic, right? So we can feel that. And they're like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. But what happens is over time, and I've just done this practice with two of my clients, where you can also do it to yourself, which is then not called orgasmic meditation, but I call it mindful pussy stroking, mindful stroking, right? And it can be just around the clitoris or it can be on it. But for 60 days, and then she started to feel sensations. She's like, oh my God, I'm feeling things not just there, but everywhere. My whole body is revving up. It's like, yeah, that's what we call turn on. And the other one, it took 84 days. But these are both women who have used vibrators a lot to get off, cannot climax with their partner, because we put more and more pressure on, not only with actually pressure on the clit, but also instead of taking things away, we add things. So when we're having sex, this is one of my favorite things to teach, that I used to teach in front of a class. It's like a couple happy having sex, great in the beginning, then at one point, and then one partner says, hey, what about that you have that fireman's helmet, can you put it on? He puts it on, and it's like, whoa, really exciting, and it's new. And it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Then 2 weeks later, it's like, it's getting a bit boring again. And they just need more pressure, more things. So he's like, okay, let me put on the jacket. And then that's amazing. And then, 2-3 weeks later, it fizzles out again. And he's like, well, let me get my fire hose. So as a society, we're used to adding more things, looking at more porn, getting newer toys, getting more things. And what this practice does, it actually takes all of that away and just brings it back to a finger and a clit. And that's it.
Simple.
Simple.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes courage to go through. That's why I also don't call it self-pleasure, because pleasure, like I said, isn't always pleasurable. And that's why it's like, okay, so it's mindful touching. And you can also mindful touch, different parts of your body and just start saying, oh, I like that. And I don't necessarily want to touch my genitals. And sometimes I teach people just to cup them, just to hold on to them. And it's like, oh, that's how I feel safe. Because now we go back to the whole trauma thing, right? It's like, oh, people have touched me in a way that has felt unsafe. So how can I just touch myself in a way? And how can I just hold myself that I feel safe and that I can open? And that's why in Tantra they say it's like a yoni. A yoni is like a flower, a bud, and it opens.
Well, and a few things you just said there, like I am keying back to. So when we first started talking, it was about how do you choose you, right? And so you just brought that back full circle where we've gone from, pleasing another partner, worrying about what they want, to bringing it back to ourselves, to where we understand what we need, that actually helps us to feel more fully who we are, right? And that trauma comes into play often. So I do want to circle back to that because I know that's become a big part of your work now in helping people deal with trauma in different capacities. I mean, even if we look at what's happening in our world with the pandemic, and there's so much fear, and so trying to help people find that release and that inward connection with themselves. Like that's such an important aspect of who we are today.
Completely. And that's it, right? We first want to learn how to feel ourselves again and know how we want to please ourselves. And only then we can communicate it to our partners, our kids. But that's often the piece, the communication piece. And the trauma, what's happening now in the world is crazy, right? I mean, there's I think coming out of this, like I was talking to you earlier, there's going to be there's a huge demand on mental health.
Yeah.
People are afraid of each other. We've become fearful because, our existence is or was in danger. You could catch this disease from someone that you come in contact with. So I see it here in England where we've opened up a little bit last week. People are still quite fearful, wearing their mask, and like, oh, you against me. So it's really becomes like that animalistic way of thinking. It's like the survival of the fittest. So there's a lot of trauma that comes up. And one of the ways that I've been working with it for the last 7 years or so, 8 years, is really recognizing that the only way is through to acknowledge your emotions, to acknowledge, because most people are like, oh, that's just baloney. Until yesterday, I had a friend of mine saying, oh, I was always just thought this coaching thing and acknowledging your emotions was all just, but it's like, but I'm doing a course at Stanford and I'm actually loving it. And I now understand that people are suffering.
Yeah.
Like,
And they don't have to.
not at all. So, I mean, so that's the whole mindfulness practice, right? This all came together, like the whole mindfulness everywhere. It's like, oh, just take a breath, get back to you. We don't have to rev so fast. And also, you start seeing it's like, what are the things that I don't want to have in my life?
Yeah.
Why am I still doing them?
Yeah. That's such a great question, and so important for all of us to take a look at, because again, it goes back to the societal norms, that the expectations that we think others have of us. And whether it's sexuality, whether it's intimacy, whether it's just even our behavior, right? Like people, expecting you to be perfect, like all of those things. It's recognizing that those are things that we create a lot of times. And so it's important that we get back in connection with ourselves and be fully who we are meant to be.
Completely, because it's that whole belief system, right? By the age of 3, we have already taken on our parents or our carers' beliefs. They're already firmly ingrained. By the time we're 6, that's it. Our beliefs are in us. And what's really interesting, one bit that I don't know, I learned only 2 years ago or so, is unconscious family loyalties. Like we all want to belong to a tribe. We're tribal animals, right? um, and we have certain values, and our family has certain values, and our tribe has values. So you see this often with people that their grandparents have been in a concentration camp. They will not get fat. They will, because that was ingrained in them that there was never enough food. So somehow their unconscious family loyalty will hold them back from doing a lot of things. Like if you're brought up in a family where, where being wealthy was frowned upon, then you're going to hold yourself back from actually making a lot of money, because that was what your parents, what your grandparents, what your uncles, what all the things were that you heard around you.
Yeah.
So that the subconscious and the unconscious is, the mind, the psyche is just so incredible.
True. And you're right. We do store ancestral behaviors from even further back that can come through in our lives today. And sometimes you think, why am I showing up this way? Why am I acting this way? And when you understand some of those, like, that can be very freeing. Absolutely.
Completely. And that's the whole thing, right? Becoming aware of it. It's like, oh, this is not mine. This is my parents.
Yeah.
Oh, this is my great grandmother who used to say this. I'm like, oh, okay. And then you can start looking at it, and then you can run some processes and actually like, oh, okay, we're getting free of this. Yeah, I'm also a hypnotherapist. I take people through regression therapy often to notice, is like, where did these beliefs come from? What did my parents talk about sexuality? Where did I start believing that I have to be a certain way, that my body has to look a certain way? I mean, there's so much body dysmorphia and body shame going on as well. That being intimate is showing all of yourself, is showing your body. If you don't feel comfortable with your body, then it's difficult to be intimate as well.
Yes, very true. Very true. Yeah. And that's a big one. I think, especially in North America, there's a lot of, when you look at fashion and models, and like you're put up against and measured, or there's this comparison of the perfect, Barbie as an example. We grew up with Barbie. She had the perfect figure. And so that is a very real aspect of what we deal with. And so again, that's why, some of the things you've said today about going inward is so important, that you get to know what you need as an individual, what gives you comfort and pleasure, and what makes you feel more intimate.
Mm-hmm. And just what are the things that bring you joy, right? And that's kind of like, it's like, oh, just look back at your childhood. That's one of my exercises I give my people, is like, just write down them things that you used to love doing when you were a kid, and then see if you can incorporate them into your life again.
Yeah, very true. It's true. So I'm just looking at our time, and I know I want to make sure we get some audience questions in. But before we do that, if you would, I'd like you to share like how our audience can reach you. And then I know you mentioned you have the Erotic Blueprint quiz that maybe you want to share, put in the chat.
Well,
and they know how to get in touch with you. And then I also would like to know what your sage advice would be, that you'd like to offer our audience, that they can walk away with today, that 2 things that they could do just to really connect more with themselves.
All right, that's the quiz. Yes, so you can connect with me, Juliette Caraman, Instagram, Juliette Caraman Van Schaardenburg, but even if you just do Caraman on Facebook as well. My website is Feel Fully You. This Sunday, we're doing a free masterclass on the Erotic Blueprints. So I will actually try and find that and put this on here as well. The link up. Sorry, multitasking.
Okay, I know I asked a lot of you. And I'll have Tuesday also include that in the recap when we release it on Apple.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, because if anyone wants to replay, we're recording it, so you can easily get that.
Awesome.
So that's pretty much how to get into how to get in touch with me. I run a free Facebook group, the Embodied Leadership Experience. Everyone's welcome to come and join that. 2 things. put a timer on 2 or 3 times a day for 1 minute. Take 2 or 3 breaths in through your nose. Actually, I'm going to do this with you here. Let's go ahead and close your eyes if you want to. And if that doesn't feel safe, keep them open. But take a breath in through your nose. And then out through your mouth. And again, in through your nose. And out through your mouth. In through your nose. And out through your mouth. And then simply look around the room and see 3 objects and just notice them. They're in your space. Go ahead and accept them. You don't have to like them. Doesn't matter. They're in your space, right? And now just turn inward and kind of notice what's happening in your body. Is there any tightness? Is there any expansion? What's the temperature that you're feeling? You might feel some sensations in your jaws. That's where we often hold a lot of tension in our jaws, and just become aware of it. I like tapping a little bit on the face, because often that's where a reaction will happen. And then notice what thoughts are coming up. Yeah, this is beautiful. The pitter patter on the forehead. I call them raindrops on our forehead. And really just start being aware of what's happening. Another beautiful one is fingers in the middle of the forehead and just pull them down to your temples. Hold on to your temple a bit. Exhale. And then again in the middle of your hairline and just pull them down about 3-4 centimeters. And all the way back to across your skull and all the way back to the neck. I'm teaching you some somatic stuff.
Yeah, really good. Nice release.
Right? Then
Yeah.
hold on to your neck, your shoulders. And then with one, you cross your hands. So right hand to left shoulder. Give your shoulder a bit of a squeeze. And then pull it across your breast to your opposite hip. Opposite hand to opposite shoulder, and then again take a deep breath in. And what we're doing is we're actually lining up the left and right lobe, brain lobes.
Nice.
So, and just kind of see what thoughts are coming up. Do I have any emotions coming up? But as simple as that.
Nice. That was a good one.
It's not long, but it just gives you enough time. It's like, oh, I've been running really fast. I need to take, I want to take some time for me.
Yeah. Well, it also clears space. Like I felt like I cleared just then when I took that, just those, couple of minutes for myself. It was like I created more space.
Right. And that was like a minute and a half. It's nothing. It's really not a lot of time. And also, I like telling my clients to do emotional release. So either I'm a tapper, so tap and bitch. You go through the tapping points and you bitch and you just let it rip, or go out to nature and just like, because nature is a good, it can really take our stuff. If that doesn't work for you, in the car on your way back from work, just actually have some loud music on and just go, oh, I'm angry. And it doesn't matter what you're angry at. Like, sometimes it's like, just stick your tongue out. If that is too much, because for some people are like, I don't know if I want to do that, because, we're still so tight together.
Yeah.
Set your timer, 5 minutes, brain dump. Keep writing if you can. Write instead of on a computer, but just write. It's like, I'm angry, I'm this, I'm that. Oh my God, my mother-in-law, she's such a pain in the neck, and I know I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm still going to do it anyway, because we filter. We
Yeah.
filter what we feel all the time. And then at first, when that's all of a sudden we don't filter anymore, it's like, whoa, okay, I'm not sure I want anyone to hear this. So go somewhere quiet, hit a
Yeah.
pillow, scream and
Let it all out.
yeah,
Beautiful.
emotional release.
Great tips. Thank you so much. And I'm going to be doing that some points today. I'm going to be setting my timer and recharging myself, because that's a quick, easy. Yeah. So I do want to open it up and see if our audience has any questions. They've been so gracious in joining us today, and I'm sure they've gotten as much from this as I have. So if there's anybody has questions, if you're not comfortable speaking up, you can certainly put them in the chat. Or don't be shy. We're happy to see your faces and take your questions.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to thank you, and amazing conversation. And yeah, that was really good. Thank you.
We're glad you enjoyed it and that you've joined us today. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
So any other questions or comments from anybody else in the audience? I got a chat says, thank you for all the great information and tips, Juliette. I am curious, what are you seeing? Hang on, I can't see it all. What are you seeing in your clients pre-pandemic and during pandemic? Are there any new issues that have surfaced? Great question.
Yes, people are together 24/7. They're going absolutely cray cray. So it's either cemented relationships and got people talking again, or it's actually really, have people do their own thing. So I've had, through the pandemic, I've had a lot of new clients who've actually wanted to come together because they're like, we're spending 24/7 in the same house. How do we create time for each other? I mean, some have young families. It's like, how do we go about creating time? How do I, as a woman, create time for myself?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Right? It's a big one. And that's where, plan it. Again, like self-care, plan in, like what I said about the 1 minute, 3-4 times a day. Plan in some time that you spend together with your partner. If you don't have a partner, spend some time for yourself. It's like, okay, so on Tuesday from 2 to 4, or whatever, from 6 to 8, whatever your time is, I'm actually going to turn off my computer, turn off my phone, and I'm just going to spend time with me. And at first, that's really uncomfortable. Or date nights with your partner, or date mornings. It's like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Turn off all your devices. Make sure you have childcare, and then really start to communicate and start having a conversation. And often one of the diets, one of the prompts I'll get them to do is like, tell me what you love about me. And that for 10 minutes, they alternate like that. And that's where the really deep stuff can come up.
Nice.
Oh, connect again, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a great way to wrap up our conversation today, and just beautiful. And you've got lots of thank yous. And but Juliette, I have to say to you, this has been amazing, and thank you so much. Like, you've got so much passion with your delivery, and you're so giving with sharing all this great information that will help all of us. And just super grateful for everything you've done. And I know that our audience that didn't get to make it today, they're going to hear it once the broadcast has gone live. And just thank you again for being such a beautiful person.
Thank you for having me. And anyone wants to email me, Juliette@feelfullyyou.com. I'm always there. There are loads of ways to get in touch with me. There are a lot of programs I'm doing at the moment. A lot of them are free, some of them are not. So get in touch.
Absolutely. And we will share with the audience and our community about the class you have on Sunday and the blueprint.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll see you on our next podcast, which is June 10th, we will be speaking with Angela Podolsky, who is a nonverbal and body language expert. And we hope that you will be able to join us then. So take care, everyone. Bye for now.